Hello guys, welcome you all. This is Shakti Academy. Please like our video and share if you like. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. Press bell symbol so that you could get updated videos of our channel. Right? A revolt in the countryside, the Bombay Account. So here previously we have discussed that the rise and fall of the Zamindars and the Jodhidas and the tribals, those who are living in the Rajmahal hills like Paharias and the Santals, right? So here you know that these peoples, the life had been changed due to the colonial rules and regulations, as well as they levying the heavy taxes on them, even though the fixed taxes, and they asked them to follow the settled cultivation and they asked them to clear the forest. But here some of the people are refused to clear the forest like Paharias. So this time Santals took the advantage and they started clearing forests, and they consolidated their power among in total areas of Rajmahal hill. So here there is a war. So what was the happened? So here previously we discussed the rise and fall of these empire, the peasants like Paharias and Santal, and here they are the reason. Here colonial government as well as the zamindars and the moneylenders were the one of the main reasons to ruin themselves, right? So here these angry, okay, the angry as well as the fury. So here they wanted to justice for them, as well as they wanted to get a justice for their sufferings. So here however it is, they need any solution for them, right? So you know that previously history will not give you only the things which they have mentioned in the record, but also sometimes the revolt as well as the war will give us a more clear idea than the theories, right? So however it is, with their angry and the fury, finally the peasants started taking war against what? Taking war against these moneylenders and the grain dealers, shopkeepers and etc. Here why they want to take revenge on this moneylender, which means here moneylender were the people who got a land from the Rajas, and they started giving to these riots and small peasants with heavy taxes. So even though whenever they were in the crisis of their economy, so here moneylender were the people who is offer the loan for the small peasants with a high cost of interest, right? So through the 19th century, the peasants in the various parts of India, they started a revolt against the moneylenders and the grain dealers. So one such big revolt had happened in 1875 in the Deccan of the Bengal, right? So next one is the account books were burnt. So what is account books were burnt? So initially the peoples like the traveler, moneylender and the shopkeeper, they used to maintain their books and the accounts books to whom they have given money and how much it has been credited and debited. So every accounts book has been mentioned by these people. So here the movement at Supa is one of the city which is located present in Pune. So the movement begins at Shupa, which is located present in Pune. It was a market center where many shopkeepers and the moneylenders lived. So the Supa is the city where the plenty of shopkeepers and the moneylenders used to live. So on 12th May 1875, riots from the surrounding rural areas gathered attack the shopkeeper. So on 12th May 1875, these riots started surrounding the rural village, and they started attacking the shopkeepers and demanding their Bahi Kathas. Bahi Kathas is nothing but the account books which was maintained by the shopkeeper and the moneylenders and others. So here they started attacking the shopkeeper and they demanding the accounts book and they debit bonds. So why they were demanding is why they were demanding these account books and the debit forms is nothing but here they wanted to burn everything. So they burned the Kathas, looted grains, and in some cases set fire the houses of shakukars. So here the shakukars were the people who act as both moneylender and the trader. So here as they were attacking shopkeeper and moneylenders and everywhere, so sometimes they looted grains from the shop, and they started burning the account books, and they set a fire off to the houses of moneylenders and traders. So this revolt has led and spread up to the Ahmednagar, and then the next 2 months it spread even further. So continuously this revolt had started spreading all over the cities which was around the Shupa, and then over the next month it has been it spread even further, and one area of 6,000 over area of 6,500 square kilometer, more than 30 villages were affected. So due to the revolt of these peasants, more than 30 villages were affected, and everywhere the pattern was the same. Sepulchres were attacked, accounts books burnt, and dead ones destroyed. So here this revolt is not only begins in Pune, but it started spreading everywhere like Ahmednagar and other places from Pune, right? So everywhere the idea was the same. The theme was the same, that small peasants have started attacking the moneylenders and the shopkeepers everywhere, and they started burning the accounts books everywhere. So terrified of the peasants attacking the Sepulchres, the field of the village, very often leaving their property and belongings behind. So due to the revolt and the fear of the attacking of the small peasants, so these Sepulchres, moneylenders and the traders, or got fear about the war, and they started leaving their property which were belonging them, and they left everything in the village, and they started running away from the village. So as the revolt spread, British officials saw the spectre of 1875. So previously you know that the revolt in 1857. So this one you already have studied in grade 8 standard, but again we are going to study in chapter 11. So here the British took some steps to stop the revolt which happened in 1857. So the same ideas have been taken by the British officials, that is nothing but the police posts were being established in the villages to frighten the rebellious peasants and the submission, and these troops were being called as 951. So these troops from these police posts which has been established in the villages, and these soldiers were being called as 951, and the people were arrested and they were punished harshly, but it took several months to bring the countryside under the control. So however, the British officials took some steps to stop the war, but it took many months to make the city to be under their control, right? So once again we can recall the Peasants Revolt. So here the Peasants Revolt begins at Shupa. Shupa is one of the city which is located present in Pune, and this revolt started on 12th May 1875. Around 12th May 1875 it surrounded, it extended to all the villages, and they started attacking the shopkeepers and demanding their account books, and finally they burned all their account books. So after that the revolt spread up to the Ahmednagar, then to get the remedies of the revolt, finally the British officials established a police post in all the villages. In this, as soon as the soldiers, the troops were called 951, right? Troops were called 951, and the people arrested and convicted. So sometimes here these peasants, they started attacking on the Saukas, right? Saukas, because they are the reason. Saukas, shopkeepers and the money lenders are the reasons for their ruin. So that's what they started attacking all the people, and this revolt extended up to the 30 to 40 villages. On all the places the ideal was the same, which means attacking the Saukas and the burning their account books and etc. So the British officials found that all the things were the same, which has been spread all over the city of the Supa, right? So the next one is about a new revenue system. So previously we discussed that the new revenue system, like a permanent settlement, in 1793. So what was the impact of the permanent settlement in 1793 is nothing but the peasants or as well as the zamindars are not happy with the revenue system, which means the revenue system has been permanently fixed, and it doesn't depend on the crops grown, and whether it's ruin or grown, that doesn't matter. But periodically the peasants want to pay the settlement to, the taxes to the zamindar. So finally the company will get the taxes from the zamindar. So it was one of the main reason for their ruin. So here when the British rule was expanded over the Bengal, now here they wanted to expand all over the subcontinent, as well as the new revenue system should be implemented to develop the financial crisis of the company, right? So why they introduced such a thing and what happened? You know that one reason was that after 1810 agricultural prices rose, increasing the value of a harvest produce and enlarging the income of the Bengal zamindar. So after 1810, the agricultural products and the crops prices were rapidly rose, and it increasing the value of the harvest produce. And here the zamindars earned plenty of monies, but since the company did not has any the company did not claim any share from the big enlarging income of the zamindars. So however, finally they fixed the taxes now, so that if even the crops failed or grown nicely, it doesn't matter. Here the peasants want to pay tax to the zamindars. So here after 1810, when the zamindars earned plenty of money, here the colonial state did not claim any share of its enlarging the income of the zamindars, but instead they concentrating on the financial resources of the company, right? So here, so that the company thought to maximize to how much we could maximize, so they started maximizing the taxes on the land. It depends on the climatic conditions as well as the soil condition. So here the next thing is about the economist. So you know that the economist named David Ricardo, right? He was the economist of 1820s, no? As well as he was one of the celebrated figure in England, and who came to India as an economist in 1820s, right? So in this time, what he thought, that he formulated many terms for the early settlements in 1820s, and he operated some of these ideas, no? So here Ricardian's ideas, you know that the colonial officials had learned Ricardian ideas during their college years. So during the college years, the company officials, those who were studied with this David Ricardian, and they learned some ideas from him, and they started implementing in subcontinents like Maharashtra and other places in 1820s. So here what Ricardian idea is telling about the land is nothing but, here he is telling that should not levy much taxes on the peasants. Instead, if they earn plenty of money, they could invest more money on their cultivating their lands. So if anybody cultivated more than the average rent which has been fixed by the company, so it doesn't matter. If the company did not levy the taxes on the cultivators, simply they will surplus the money, will be unlikely to productively invested to improve the land. Many British officials in India thought that the history of Bengal confirmed Ricardo's theory. So here what he is telling, according to the Ricardian ideas, what he is telling, if landowners as well as the zamindars earn plenty of money, it doesn't matter. But if they learn, you know, if they earn plenty of money, definitely they could harvest every money for developing the land, so that the company as well as the zamindars will get the benefits of this, no? So that some of the British officials thought that the Bengal had been made with the history of Ricardo's theory. So after that, the revenue system was introduced in the Bombay Account, is known as Riots settlement. So after that, Riots settlement was implemented in the Deccan of the Bengal, and it was implemented by Sir Thomas Munro in 1820. Note on, Riots settlement was introduced by Sir Thomas Munro in 1820 around the Bengal Deccan, and the revenue was directly settled with the Riots. So previously the revenue was collected by the zamindars, and they have a power to collect the revenues from the Riots and the peasants. But this settlement is telling that the revenue can be directly settled with Riots, and the average income from the different types of the soil were estimated. So here the the revenue was fixed. It depends on the settlements as well as the soils of the land, and the revenue paying capacity rights was assessed the proportion of the fixed the share of the state. So here the minimum average of the taxes were being imposed by the British company to the Riots, so that they could pay the taxes directly to the company, and these lands were surveyed every 30 years, and the land revenue rates increased. So the main theme of the Riots settlement is nothing but once in a 30 years the land will be resurveyed. Okay, the land will be surveyed every in a 30 years, and new revenue rates will be imposed on the land, and therefore the revenue demand was no longer permanent. So same as permanent settlement, here Raitwari settlement is also did not longer for many years. The recapitulation of the revenue system. So you know that in 1810 agricultural prices were rose. So since the company did not take a share from the zamindars, which means the zamindars earn lots of money, and they started enlarging their income, both the zamindars as well as the peasants. So here the company thought to demand maximum. The company tried to demand maximum prices for their land. So after that, in 1820, economist David Ricardo. So according to Ricardian's theory, what he is telling now, he said that if the company did not levy the taxes on the farmers, then they definitely, the zamindars as well as the peasants will spend more money on cultivating the lands. So through that they will increase the agricultural production. So finally the company could get satisfied and everything. But here some of the British officials did not implement the theory of David Ricardo, but finally they implement the new theory, that is nothing but the Raitwari system, which was imposed by Sir Thomas Munro in 1820, and the aim, the moral, the idea of the Raitwari settlement is nothing but the lands will be resurveyed every 30 years, right? Land will be resurveyed every 30 years, and again after the 30 years, after the resurvey, the company will fix the new revenue price taxes, right? So the next one is the revenue demand and the peasant debt. So the two revenue system, the act which was imposed by the British on the peasants, like a permanent settlement in 1793 and the Raitwari settlement in 1820s, was not to fulfill the needs of the peasants, so that they were involved in the revolt. So here the first revenue settlement in the Bombay Deccan was made in 1820. That's nothing but the Raitwari settlement 1820 by Sir Thomas Munro. This revenue that was demanded so high in that many places peasants had deserted their village and migrated the new region. So what is the impact of this act? The Raitwari Act in 1820 is nothing but this act implemented, implemented and levied heavy taxes depends on the soil of the soil as well as the areas and the rainfall and the condition, climatical condition of the lands. So here the number of the villages, the peasants, those who were taking the lands of the Rocky and other places, they could not get the satisfied crops, as well as they failed to pay the taxes, so that they started migrating to the new region for their settlement. Here the peasants, when the rain failed, the harvests were poor. So if they get sufficient crops, and if the crops grow well, so they could pay the taxes to the company. But if they get a poor rainfall, as well as if the climatic condition was not good, so the crop definitely will fail to grow. So in that way they cannot pay their taxes. But here the British economically, they allotted the taxes depends on the lands. Peasants found it's impossible to pay the revenue, so that if they get a good crops they will pay, otherwise they cannot, so that they found it was an impossible to pay the revenue. However, the collectors change in the revenue collection were taken to keep demonstrating the efficiency, the pleasing their superiors, and so they went about extracting payment with the utmost severity. And when someone failed to pay, his crops were seized and the fine was imposed on the whole village. So here, however it is, the collectors, previously the collectors were imposed, appointed in every district to collect the taxes from the peasants. So here, to show their superior to their British officials, they were in the position to collect the taxes from the people. And if anybody failed to pay the taxes, their crops will be seized, as well as the fine will be imposed to the whole village. But after 1830, the problem became more severe, and the prices of the agriculture product fell sharply after 1832. So after 1830, what happened in 1832? The prices of the crops were being sharply ruined, as well as it took minimum 50, a decade and a half, which means 15 years to it took 15 years to recover all the problems, which means the peasants all in the decline of their income. So the country was devastated by the famine in 1832, between 1832 to 1834. So that due to the poor due to the poor income, so the country was devastated. first, I mean, the country was suffered a lots and lots of the famine, and between 1832 and 1804, and one third of the cattle has been killed in the Deccan, and half of the human population were died due to the great famine between 1832 to 34. So here those who were survived no agricultural stocks to see them, then the crisis unpaid balances of revenue mounted. So here those who survived had no, so those who were survived and those who were escaped from this famine, they had no agricultural stocks and no cattle and the nothing, still they were suffering due to the economic crisis, and the unpaid balances of the revenue will be mounted plenty. So how did the cultivators live through the such years? So through the time of the famine, how did these cultivators lived, and what are the things they have purchased, and how did they get their children married? So inevitably they borrowed the revenue could rarely to pay it without the loan from the moneylender, but once the loan was taken, the riot found it difficult to pay it back. So however it is, once the company was given the land to the riots for cultivating, here the peasants are in the position to, I mean here the riots were in the position to get the loan from the moneylender. So however it is, every riots cannot survive without getting a loan from the moneylender, but once the loan was received from moneylender, it was very difficult to pay it back. A debt mounted and the loans remained unpaid. Peasants' dependence on the moneylender increased. They now needed loans even to buy their everyday needs and meet their production expenditure. So after the great famine, actually here the riots doesn't have any facility, and that they don't have any money to buy even the necessary things, I mean everyday needs. So they often depended on the moneylenders. So here the moneylenders were increased, and the plenty of loans has been received by the riots from moneylender, and sometimes here even they started getting loan from the moneylender even to buy everyday needs and their expenditure. By 1840, the officials were finding evidence of alarming levels of peasants' indebtedness in everywhere. So in 1840, the officials received the news that the peasants are peasants were facing the economic crisis and the problems of indebtedness all over the subcontinent. By the mid 1814, there were the sign of an economic recovery shot. So after that 1840, there was a sign of the economic development slow by slow. Many British officials had begun to realize the settlement of the 1820s had been hard. So after that, many British officials from the company realized that the settlement the Riots settlement which has been imposed in 1820s was very harsh to the people. So the revenue demanded was exorbitant, the system was rigid, and the peasants' economy of the very collapse. So due to the Riots settlement in 1820, so the system was very rigid, as well as it ruined all the peasants and their economic crisis and everything. So the revenue demand was moderated and encouraged the peasant to expand the cultivation. So after the problems had happened and after the famine and everything, again the revenue system was moderated, rewritten, and after 1845 agricultural prices recovered steadily. So after 1845, somewhat the agricultural prices started growing nicely, and the cultivators were now extending their acreage, moving into the new areas. So after the increasing the prices of the agricultural products, many cultivators started to do their works, and many of the people are started shifting to other areas for the good settlement and the cultivation, and many people are transferring their pasture land into the cultivated lands. But to expand the cultivation, peasants need more fluff and cattle. So here already these peasants were in economic crisis and they don't have any cattle and anything. So here if they have land, they want to more labors, as well as they need more things like they want to buy the seed, and they need materials for ploughing the land, and definitely they need a cattle. But here they don't have any cattle, so that they were in the crisis. So again they want to they supposed to depend on the money lender, right, for getting the cattle and the equipments for ploughing the lands and etc. They needed money to buy the seeds and land. For all they had to turn once again to the money lender for loans. So for cultivating the lands, many things they needed, because previously they lost everything due to the famine and everything. So again they started depending on this started depending on the money lender for getting the loan. But it's very easy to get, but once it has been getting from them, it's very difficult to settle the loans. The next one is about then came the cotton boom. So here the cotton boom is nothing but the supplement of the raw material, cotton raw materials to Britain from different countries. So previously you know that before 1860 the raw material, the cotton raw material, 3/4 of the raw material of the cotton was supplied by United States of America to the Britain. But here the British manufacturers are in worry that it won't be lost for a long if because they are often depending on the American supplies. If something happen or any war happen to America, and immediately these supplies will be cut off, so definitely the merchants in the Britain will be troubled off. So here they wanted to look for the alternative supply. So that's why in 1857 the Cotton Supply Association was founded in Britain. Note down, in 1857 the Cotton Supply Association was founded in Britain, and in 1859 the Manchester Cotton Company was formed. So due to the worry about the due to the worry about the American supplies, so they wanted to look for the alternative resources of the cotton supply. So in 1857 Cotton Supply Association was founded, and in the very next year of 1859 the Manchester Cotton Company was formed. So here the object of the company is nothing but to encourage the cotton production in every part of the world. So the object of the Manchester Company is nothing but to encourage the cotton producers, right, the cotton production in every part of the world suited for its growth. So here you know that India was seen as a country that could supply cotton in Lancashire if the American supply dried up. So Lancashire is one of the island which is I mean the group of people those who are getting cotton from the England. So if American supplied to be dried up, now we could get cotton supplies from India. So that they started motivating the cotton supplies in India. It possessed suitable soil and climate favorable to cotton cultivation and cheap labor. So in India has a I think it has a very suitable soil for growing up cotton, and it has a good climatical condition as well as the favorable I mean this cultivation and the soil I mean the soil were favorable to cotton cultivation, and also we could get the cheap labor. So when the American Civil War broke out in 1861, the America was totally I mean almost they stopped their production, cotton production, to sending off to Britain. So here what happened, the America fell to less than the 3% of the normal. So initially what they have sent, so they reduced to 3% of their normal production. So here 2 million birds, right, 2 million birds in 1861, but within next year it reduced into 55,000 birds in 1862, so that the merchants in England, they are getting worried and they are lack of supplies to the people. So here a frantic message were to send to India and elsewhere to increase the cotton export in India. So after that, previously we have discussed that here the Britain merchants wants to do some alternative sources, so that's what they choose in India. Why they have chosen India is nothing but it has a good soil and the climatical conditions and the cheap labor, so that's why they have choose India to cultivate the cotton. So here immediately they have sent a message to India to cultivate the cotton as well as to export the cotton to Britain. So here cotton merchants visited the cotton districts and access supplies and encourage the cultivation. So once they received the message from Britain, immediately as soon as they have visited the cotton districts, and they started encouraging the farmers, right? So as cotton prices soared, export merchants in Bombay were keen to secure as much cotton as possible to meet the Britain demand. So they gave advances to urban showcards, and who is in extended credit to those rural moneylenders who promised to secure the products. So here what happened, once they visited the villages for encourage the cultivation, so immediately these British officials, they started providing the loan to the moneylenders and other riots to cultivate the cotton and to sell to them itself. And when it was promised by the moneylenders and as well as the riots that they want to cultivate the cotton as well as they want to sold to the company, when there is a boom in the market, credit flows easily for those who give out loans feel secure about the recovering their money. So when the prices were increasing rapidly increased, the people started giving more loans to the peasants. At the same time, the peasants also voluntarily they are cultivating their cottons. These developments had a profound impact of the Deccan country, and the riots in the Deccan villages suddenly found access to seemingly limitless credit. So immediately, even the riots, they started cultivating the cotton, and they their economic crisis was rapidly increased, and they lived the sophisticated thing, but they were being given under but they were giving they were giving being given 100 as advance for every acre and planted their cotton. So previously you know that 100 was big money, no? So they have each acre allotted, 100 rupees has been allotted for the each acres. So they happily, the small riots and the peasants happily cultivating their started cultivating their cotton. So Saukars were more than willing to extend long-term loans. So here the Saukars also wanted to extend their loan, which means they wanted to give loan to more people. Since these riots were good in their financial condition, so the Saukars thought that they could repay it as soon as. So here the moneylenders are started willing to give loan to all the riots and peasants. While the American crisis continued, the cotton production in Bombay Deccan expanded. Between 1860 and 1864, the cotton aggregate doubled. In 1862, 90% of the cotton imports into the Britain were coming from India. So here the American Civil War was continued. So here India, India was steadily continued the export. India was steadily continued to export its cotton to Britain. So here in 1862, over 90% of the cotton were being imported into Britain from India. So that's why here, as I told you, that once the Civil War had happened in America, in which year? In 1861. Previously the first cotton mill was set up in Bombay in India in 1853. Not on first cotton mill was set up in India 1853 at Bombay. So from this cotton mill they started collecting the cotton and they exporting to the European merchants. So here, while the American crisis continued, so we can discuss that, but this boom years did not bring a prosperity to the all cotton producers. Some rich peasants did gain, but for all the majority, cotton expansion meant heavier debt. So here, due to the cotton cultivation, some rich peasants they gained lots and lots, but here the debit is much heavier to cultivate the cotton. Right. So next one is the credit dries up. So how did the credit dries up? Is nothing but while the boom lasted, cotton merchants in India had a vision to capturing the world market in raw cotton, permanently displacing America. So once the cotton demand was increased, and they started exporting the cotton. 90% of the cotton were exporting to Britain. So here the cotton merchants from India thought that here permanently we want to displace the America. Instead, India want to India should consolidate its power of the supply of raw material of cotton permanently. But here the editor of Bombay Gazette. So here Bombay Gazette is one of the first English newspaper which was published from Bombay, and previously this was published as a Bombay Herald in 1789, but in 1791 it was renamed as Bombay Gazette. So the editor of Bombay Gazette, what he said that what can prevent India from supplanting the slave states as the feeder of Lancashire. So however it is, the India can be leading as a slave state under the Britain, but still it's one of the feeder of the Lancashire by giving the cotton and other things. By 1865, these dreams were over, the Civil War were ended, the cotton production in America revived, and the Indian cotton exports to Britain steadily declined. By 1865, what happened? The Civil War from America had ended, and again the America started produce more cotton, started to produce more cotton, and they again what happened? Here the Indian cotton exports to Britain steadily declined, which means Indian cottons were totally refused. Instead, again the America consolidated their power into Britain. So exports merchants and the Saukars in Maharashtra, they no longer keen to extending their long-term credit. So here even the Saukars and the merchants, moneylenders, they did not yearn for the long time, But once they could see the demand of Indian cotton, once they could see the demand of that Indian cotton, the prices of Indian cotton were fall off. So that time they started to reduce the loan to the moneylenders, as well as they restricted their advances to peasants and demanded repayment of outstanding debits. So why they here suddenly they restricting their advances to peasants and they demanding the repayment of their money is nothing but, so they know that the Indian prices, I mean Indian cottons were losing its prices. So here however it is, the peasants never pay their loans back. So that's what here they are restricting the debit from the Riots. So while the credit dried up, the revenue demand increased. So previously we discussed that according to the right-to-worry settlements, once in a 30 years the land will be resurveyed again, then new revenue demand will be imposed. No, so at the same time, when the credits were dried up, now it's a time to resurvey the land and to fix their new revenue demand. So previously they have they have resurveyed in 1820s. Okay, but now what is the year? 1850 something we are discussing now. So again it's a time to resurvey the land and to increase the revenue. So here from 50 to 100%. So totally the British company increased the land revenue into 50 to between 50 to 100%. So here riots are not supposed to pay the revenue, which means their production, I mean the cotton production are falling and their fields are disappearing. So here again they wanted to turn up to the moneylender for expecting the loan, but this time moneylender is now refused the loans. Why he refused the loan? Previously we discussed that he knows that the Indian cottons were the prices of Indian cottons were falling off. So now the moneylender now refused the loans. So he no longer confines the Riots' capacity to repay. So here even moneylender refused to loan to the Riots. So here the Riots doesn't have doesn't have any source to repay the money. So once again the company is in the position to seize all the crops as well as the lands of Riots. So the next one is about the experience of injustice. So here the angry of these riots and the peasants made the moneylenders to be more violent and everything. So here what happened is nothing but, previously we have discussed that these moneylenders refused to provide a loan to these riots, which means they came to know that these these cotton products were the prices of the cottons were falling down, and if they provide money to the riots, anyway they are unable to pay the money, right? So that's what they refused here. So here the thing of which are the things made the riots were in angry is nothing but, so however it is, actually they did not worry about the thing whatever they have lost, but here in this economic crisis and in this juncture, here moneylenders were being insensitive to their plight, which means previously the moneylenders received a number of interest more than the principal amount, but here anyway moneylenders acted only for the money, right? So now they refuse to give money. So here more than the things whatever they have lost, they did not worry, but here they are totally getting worried about that these moneylenders were being insensitive to their plight. So that's what sometimes there were some customary norms of the countryside is nothing but between the riots and the moneylender. So here such customary what are the customary norms is nothing but both moneylenders as well as the riots, they have some norms for providing the loans and the rules and regulations for collecting the loan and everything. So here the one general norm is nothing but, here however it's the moneylender should not charge more money than the principal amount. So that's the first norm is nothing but, the moneylender should not charge more money than the principal amount. So this means that limit moneylender exaction is defined what he could count it as a fair interest, and under colonial rule these norms broke down in one of many cases investigated by the Deccan Riots Commission. So after that, under the colonial power, once the system survey land system had been implemented, this colonial government introduced a committee is named as the Deccan Riots Committee. So here what is Deccan Riots Committee is nothing but, the moneylenders had charged over 2,000. So according to the Riots Commission, so the Riot Commissions came to know that the moneylender charged 2000 rupees as an interest for the capital amount of 100 rupees. Actually, the loan amount is 100 rupees, but they charged 2000 rupees as a interest. So it was the one of the petition which was received by this Deccan Riots Commission from these riots. Okay, so it was one of the injustice, okay, injustice to their livelihood. So here what they did, they started inquiring about the customaries, rules and regulations of this moneylender and the interest rate and everything. So here deeds of hire, you know that deeds of hire, when the debts mounted, which means when the peasants were in economic crisis, so that time they unable to pay their loan back to the moneylender, right? So that time what they will do now, they don't have any option, but they have to give all their possession things like land, carts and the animals to the moneylender, right? Which means they unable to pay the money now. So instead of money, the assets will be given to them. So without the animals, he could not continue to cultivate. So without the animals and land, how the peasants will cultivate their land? So no way, no. So again, they will take their lands on rent and animal in hire. So again, actually that's are their own only. But in the first beginning itself, they unable to pay their loan, so that it was seized by the moneylender. So next time, if the crops are there, if the seeds are there, if the climatical condition is good now, again they want to cultivate. So in the cases, they will hire the land from the moneylender and hire the animal from the same moneylender for ploughing the land. So here there will be a bond, you know. So what will be there in the bond is nothing but, here Riots had to sign deed in the hire stating that clearly that these animals and the carts did not belong to him. In cases of conflict, these deeds could be enforced through the court. So here what the bond is telling about the peasants is nothing but the thing whichever had been got as a rent as well as hired by the riots from the moneylender, these things are not owned by whom? Riots, which means these are all the owners of these are the moneylenders were the owners of all the things. So we just getting the things for we just hiring the things. So that should be signed by riots, right? So next one is the riots came to see the moneylenders as devious and deceitful. So previously we discussed that these moneylenders refused to pay money, so that in some cases they will seize their land whenever they were in the economic crisis. So during that time, these riots came to see these moneylender as the very cruel and the killer of a human, right? Then finally they complained of moneylenders in the manipulating laws for forging account. Then after their complaint and the petition of the riots to the Deccan committee, and finally in 1859 the British passed the limitation law. Note on, in 1859 British passed a limitation law, in that what the law stated is nothing but the bond signed between the moneylenders riots would have a validity only for 3 years. So the bond is what the limitation law is telling about the bond is nothing but this sign of the moneylender as well as the riots will be validity only for the 3 years. After 3 years, they want to rewrite the bond, right? So this law was meant to check the accumulation of the interest over time. The moneylender, however, turned the law around, forcing the riots sign the new bond every 3 years. So however, it's that sometimes the crop will grow nicely and sometimes it failed to grow. But whenever the riots were unable to pay the loan, so it will lead for at minimum 4-5 years. So once the 3 years over, again the moneylenders force the riots to sign in the new bond. So that time how they will calculate the capital amount is nothing but when the new bond was signed, the unpaid balance, that's the original loan, and the accumulated interest that entered as the principal on which new set interest charges for calculated. So here actually the principal amount plus the interest what they have to pay, everything will be considered as the capital, the principal amount. For the principal amount, a new interest rate will be calculated by the moneylender, right? So in petition that the Deccan Riots Commission collected, the riots describe how this process worked and how moneylenders used a variety of other means to short change of riot. So previously we discussed that the Deccan Riot Commission have collected the information about the interest rate and the money system, I mean a lending system of these moneylender from the riots. So once again they collected, this is how these moneylenders were using the system for ruining the riots. They refused to give the receipt when loans were paid, entered the fictitious figures in bonds, acquired the peasants' harvest at a low price, and ultimately took over peasants' property. So here moneylenders playing an important role in this economic, financial crisis is nothing but, so actually initially they won't provide any receipt, any receipt to the riots if they paid a loan, and simply it will be entered in a record as well as the bond. And sometimes they used to used to acquire the peasants' crops in a low cost, very low cost. So this is how these moneylender ultimately destroyed all the riots. So deeds on the bonds appeared as a symbol of the new appraisal system. In the past, such deeds had been rare. The British, however, were suspicious of the transaction based on the informal understanding. As commission was passed, the terms of the transaction was believed had to be clearly, unambiguously and categorically stated. The contracts, deeds and the bonds are regulated by law unless the deed or contract was legally enforceable if it had no value. So finally the British through the Deccan Commission, right, through the Deccan Riots Commission, the British came to know that there will be a informal source of money, right? So I think you have studied in the 10th economics, right? So the informal source of money that from moneylenders, traders and the friends and families, right? So this informal source of money is playing an important role, as well as which is destroying all the riots, right? So this is how hereafter legally the contract should be signed legally, as well as this will be supervised by the British officials and as well as the company officials, right? Then after that, over times they came to associate with the misery of their lives with the new regime and the bonds of the dates. They had made a sign to thumb impressions of the documents, but they did not what were they actually signing. So previously we discussed that here the British said that everything should be documented and signed legally, right? So in this, what they had written in the document, actually that was done out by the riots, so they had no idea about the classes and the moneylenders inserted in the bond. So whatever they have written in the bond, so here most probably 90% of the peasants and the riots don't know to read and write. So however it is, now they want money, so without reading the bond, definitely they will sign in the bond, but they feared the written word. But however it is, actually they don't know what they have written in the document, but they are getting a fear of the word which they have written in the document here, but they have no choice, but they have to survive their life. So that's what they are expecting, the loan from the moneylender, and finally what, unwilling to give loans without legal bonds. So without legal bonds, legal bonds here, moneylenders are unwilling to provide a loan. So finally they are getting signed legally in the bond from riots, right? So the last one is the Deccan Rights Commission. So Deccan Rights Commission, actually here the revolts of the riots and the peasants were spreaded all over the Deccan, in the subcontinent and the Bombay and everywhere. But here unwillingly it was very serious, but the government is getting worried about the memories of 1857 revolt which is spreaded from where Delhi to everywhere. But that time the government did not take prevent steps to control it. So again they are getting the fear. So finally they started a commission. Okay, they set up government of Bombay set up the commission to investigate causes of the riots. So finally here the government appointed one commission to inquire the causes of the riots, right? To inquire the causes of the riots, and this commission produced a report that was presented the British Parliament in 1878. Note down. So the new commission, Deccan's Riots Commission, submitted the report of these causes of riots to the British Parliament in 1878, and finally this report provides a history in the range of source for all the study in the riots. This commission held inquiries the districts where the riots spread, and according to statements, soakers and eyewitness compared the statistical data of revenue rates, prices of interest rates in the different region, and collated the reports spent by the district collectors. So how did they collect such information about the causes of the riots? Is nothing but wherever the riots were spreaded all over the districts, they went everywhere, and finally they got it they got information from them, and the soakers and the other people were considered as the eyewitness of this, and revenue rates and the prices and the interest rate and the principal amount and the bond years of signing the bond, everything had been noted clearly in the commission, and finally the report has been sent by the district collectors to the British Parliament, right? So this was the Decon's Rights Commission, right?